I am Jacob Hornberger, Libertarian candidate for president, and as you can see, I'm on the road again. Not going to a convention, but going to a hike with my dog, my Princess Cassie, and so I got a little bit of time here. And so I thought I'd give you a post-debate commentary, a twofer, you're going to get a twofer, on the Libertarian Party state conventions in Louisiana this past weekend, as well as Alaska. Now, I only attended the Louisiana one in New Orleans, but I did the Alaska one on Sunday morning from my hotel room via Zoom. So I'm going to give you a report on both conventions. Both conventions, as is customary in the Libertarian Party, were just really nice. In Alaska, they actually were up at 9 a.m. in the morning. It was 12 noon Central Time, and I want to thank you all again for getting up early on Sunday morning to listen to my perspectives on this race. And then the one in Louisiana was just a really nice affair. Evening dinner, presentation, nice crowd. Everybody was grateful that we were there, and they made us feel grateful with good old-fashioned Southern hospitality, and I want to thank you all very much for that. So there were three interesting parts of these conventions that really kind of interrelate. And so I thought I'd discuss those three things. They deal with actual questions that came in from the audience as well as from the moderator. One question that was of interest, especially to me, was from the audience. An audience member came to the microphone and made reference to the decision that I made not to participate in the Libertarian Party fundraising scheme, in which they decided that only the top fundraisers for the Libertarian Party would participate in the debate at the national convention. And I decided that I would not participate in that scheme. I thought it was highly improper. So they're not going to permit me to participate in that debate. So the questioner said to everybody on the stage, would the rest of you be willing to join in Jacob's boycott of this debate? And one person said, well, if everybody else does, I'll join in it too. And then somebody else said, well, it really wouldn't do any good because they've got additional people that they've added their pictures, and so they would just let all of us go and have a debate with the people that they've added. Which of course makes sense. You know, I wouldn't want anybody to be joining a boycott on my behalf. But what was interesting to me is that every single one of the people on that stage, the presidential candidates, were opposed to this scheme, this debate scheme, fundraising scheme for the party, and they expressed that opposition. And one of them brought up the fact that, you know, we've had this token system for years and years in the Libertarian Party. It's worked great. And what happens at the national convention is every delegate is given a token, and then he goes and puts that token in a box that has a particular candidate that he wants to be in the debate. And that way the non-serious candidates don't garner enough tokens. You have to have a minimum amount of tokens to get on the debate stage, and that's the way they filter out the non-serious candidates with these tokens. It's just a fantastic way to decide who's going to be in the debate, as compared to who is going to be the best fundraiser or the best donor to the Libertarian Party. And as I indicated in my opposition video to this, it's a manipulative scheme. They're having financial problems in the National Party, so this is a way to manipulate donors into donating to the party that might not otherwise do so because they want to help out their candidate. But when it came around to me, I pointed out something else, that, you know, this is a nominating process. We should not be looking for ways to exclude the serious candidates, any of the serious candidates. I mean, you would think that they would want the delegates to hear everybody's perspective. How else can you decide who the best candidate is? In your contest, you know, they may decide who the best fundraiser is, but there's not necessarily a correlation between being a professional fundraiser and being a good presidential candidate. And so the values are totally skewed here with this thing. All right, so let me move to the question the substantive question, the philosophical question, with respect to what happened in Louisiana. Now, the moderator asks a question that goes like this. How do you feel about the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare? Do you feel it should be continued, or do you feel it should be repealed? Now, that's a fascinating question in that how it's phrased, because there is no question that Obamacare was a reform of the healthcare system. There was a major healthcare crisis that precipitated Obamacare, that actually motivated Obamacare. We often forget that what Congress was trying to do is to address the crisis in healthcare that existed, massive healthcare crisis, previous to Obamacare. So the moderator is asking, what should be done about this reform, healthcare reform? So I'm the first one to answer, and I say, well, it's a no-brainer to reform it, but that's not sufficient, because that's not the root of the problem. Because there was a crisis beforehand, and so we need to examine what's the cause of the crisis. And the cause of that crisis was Medicare and Medicaid. And I point out that America had the finest healthcare system in history prior to these two socialist programs, Medicare and Medicaid. I mean, prices were low. Nobody had major medical insurance. You didn't need it. Prices were so low and stable in the 50s and early 60s that going to the doctor was like going to the grocery store. You don't have insurance to go to the grocery store. You might need it now with the Federal Reserve's inflationary policies. But back then, going to the grocery store was, okay, just normal expenses of life, and so was the doctor. And you might have catastrophic health care insurance, but nobody had major medical. Nobody needed it. You just paid the doctor right there. And doctors handled the poor for free. They just did it out of a sense of moral obligation, ethical obligation. They were still very wealthy. They loved what they did in life. Some doctors made house calls. And you had inventions taking place and innovations. It wasn't a pure libertarian free market healthcare system, but it was pretty darn close. It was a phenomenal system, best in history. Medicare and Medicaid come into existence in the Lyndon Johnson administration and place a massive socialist program. Now, there's no question these are socialist programs. They originated among German socialists. They were imported into the United States. They come into existence during Johnson's Great Society programs. And the notion is that you're going to take money from one group of people and give it to another group of people through the initiation of force or taxation. The IRS is collecting this money to fund these socialist programs. So my position in this debate was, you need to get rid of the root of the problem. It's like cancer on the body politic. If you can excise cancer, you excise it. You don't modify it or reform it or reduce it. You get rid of it. So now let me put things in a historical context here, because that's important. And I've related the story in the past. Some of you may have already heard it, but it bears repeating. That 3 years ago, I was seeking the party's nomination. And the first debate out was the South Carolina debate. And I had not announced in time to qualify for the debate. I forget what the time period was, but I announced later than qualified for the debate. But I went to the debate to listen to it. And so the first question, or first couple of questions right out of the chute, was by Matt Welch, the moderator from Reason Magazine. And Welch says, "What do you do about Medicare?" And every single one of the respondents came up with a reform plan, some way of reform, health savings accounts, direct medical care, do this, do that. They all had their favorite reform program. And so after the debate was over, I returned home and I wrote up a piece saying, this is how I would have answered it. I mean, which to me was perfectly normal. Hey, if I'd been in the debate, this is how I would have answered. I figured, Libertarian Party members ought to know how I would answer this. How else can you make a reasoned decision on who should be the nominee unless you know what everybody's position is? And so I said, I would have answered repeal without any hesitation. Repeal it. And get rid of the socialist program that is the root cause of the crisis, and that has destroyed what had been the finest healthcare system in history. I said, this is the only solution. There is no other solution. Well, immediately, Welch and Reason go on the attack against me. because they're part of this reform wing of the libertarian movement, reform mindset, that we just need to settle for reforming our welfare state serfdom. And so somebody comes along and says, well, let's dismantle this thing. And oh my gosh, what they said was, Jacob's just trying to show that he's more libertarian or more principled than the rest of the candidates. And it's that critique is supposed to shut people like us down that are calling for freedom. Because you see, it's not about who's more principled or more libertarian. It's about freedom. Is this a freedom position? And as I say in every debate, and those of y'all that have been in these debates where I've participated, you know that I say our job as libertarians is to lead America to freedom. That's our job. And in the process to garner a big vote turnout, but not at the expense of our principles. And it's my contention that this message of libertarian socialism that we've been advocating for at least 20 years and serfdom reform cannot lead America to freedom. It's incapable, because it continues the socialism and continues the serfdom. If you're going to continue the socialism and serfdom, that's not freedom. To get freedom, you've got to dismantle the serfdom. You got to dismantle the structure of serfdom. You've got to dismantle the socialism, repeal the socialism. So it's not a question of who's more principled and who's more libertarian. How would you even measure such a thing? It's impossible to measure. Is somebody supporting drug laws and opposing immigration controls more principled than vice versa? How do you measure it? It's ridiculous. But this is the way the reform wing tries to shut down the dissemination of freedom ideas, because they want people to be exposed only to the reform. And for them, that's freedom. Or getting better people, for example, selected to the Federal Communications Commission, and celebrating the FCC chairman for bringing free enterprise principles to the regulatory process. Okay, but that's not freedom. Freedom is abolishing the Federal Communications Commission and all restrictions on the free speech rights of people. So then, right after that, after Welch goes on the attack and Reason go on the attack, I get a call from one of my principal supporters that's in a panic. He's read the article and he says, man, you've got to take down that article immediately. You have just cost yourself the nomination. You can't get nominated in this party if you're calling for the repeal of Medicare and also Social Security, because it's too deeply ingrained in the party. You've cost yourself this nomination. You have to take this article down immediately. And of course, I didn't do that. I continued to maintain that we cannot stand in favor of socialism in any respect. Social Security, which is the crown jewel of American socialism, and along with Medicare and Medicaid, that if we want to get freedom, we got to get rid of socialism. Socialism has been the bane of mankind. And then I later learned that one of the campaigns was saying, we always knew Jacob would self-destruct by calling for the repeal of Social Security, because Libertarian Party members would never be able to handle that, because the standard message in the party has become the support of Social Security, Medicare, and other welfare state programs like school vouchers and taking over the public school systems and immigration controls and that sort of thing. So if we go back to, let's say, the South Carolina debate, you go back and watch this, it's there on my website at jacobforliberty.com. I mean, my opponents most of them were vociferous in favor of Social Security. When I said we need to get rid of this thing if we're going to lead America to freedom. And man, oh no, Jacob, you're heartless, you lack compassion. We need to continue this thing for at least one generation, which is 25 years. And people will be dying in the streets. And this is what socialism does. It creates this mindset of helpless dependency, like we couldn't survive without it. People will be dying. Well, pure nonsense. America lived without socialism for 125 years or so. And nobody was dying in the streets as a result. And on the contrary, there was so much economic prosperity because you didn't have the taxes to necessary to support all this socialism. So people got to keep everything they earned. There was no income tax. And there was also the greatest outburst of voluntary charity, where children and grandchildren would help parents and grandparents out on a voluntary basis. And the church groups of America are filled with people. But this notion that you're showing care and compassion through the support of a socialist program that depends on the initiation of force is just a crock. I mean, you're not showing any care or compassion through the initiation of force. It's always easy to be good, caring, and compassionate with money that's been stolen by the IRS from other people. It's much more difficult to be caring and compassionate with your own money. Yeah, but that's what genuine charity is, when you're doing it with your own money and your own time and your own efforts. So I've continued to maintain, ever since South Carolina and before and after, that we need to lead America in the restoration of these values of voluntary charity and free markets and freedom. That's our job as libertarians. All right, so that's the message I gave. That's the answer I gave. Immediately, one of my opponents says, that's a crappy answer. That's his adjective. That's a crappy answer to want to repeal Medicare and Medicaid. You see, this is what we're facing in this party. That freedom from socialism is a crappy message. And then it goes down the line where, you know, everybody favored the repeal of Obamacare, yeah, but nobody says, well, no, it wasn't a crappy message. It's a message of freedom, because they all agree with the opponent that said it's a crappy message, that we need to continue Social Security and Medicare, or specifically by not objecting, they were saying, we got to keep Medicare and Medicaid intact. And so there's no doubt in my mind that they all shared that sentiment, that to abolish these socialist programs is a crappy message. Freedom, which it necessarily means the dismantling of socialism, is a crappy message. And this is what I've been saying throughout this campaign. You know, there's this notion among some of the party members that, oh, we've got, 7 candidates or so, 8 candidates, whatever it is, and it's just a matter of picking one or the other. Oh, no, it's not. You've got one message over here that is shared collectively, and then you got the message I'm putting out, which is dismantle these socialist programs without any hesitation. And that's the only solution to the healthcare crisis. See, because when they all said abolish Obamacare, they don't deal with the crisis that precipitated Obamacare. A massive healthcare crisis. What do you do with that crisis? Oh, they would say, well, you need free market reforms. And one of them said, oh, we need a free market, reform here, and bring free enterprise to the process here. None of it will work. This is what they do not get. Socialism cannot be made to work. As long as you have socialized medicine in forms of health, of Medicare and Medicaid, no reform will ever work. It will never fix the system, because socialism is inherently defective. And that's the message we need to take to the American people if we're going to lead them to freedom. If we're going to settle for reform of serfdom, and that's what socialism is, it's a serfdom, then go ahead. We put out the same message we've put out for 20 years, that we got to continue with Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and other welfare state programs, including income taxation. Some of my opponents say, oh, I would abolish income tax. No, they wouldn't. Because if you continue with these socialist programs, what do they think how do they think they're going to fund these socialist programs? Except through massive income taxation or printing the money up, one or the other. Then let me shift over to Alaska, because it bears a direct relationship to what I'm talking about here. Fascinating question, but it that comes from an audience member. But my hunch is that it's a question that is, or a point. It wasn't really a question. It was a point that she made that I think is probably shared by a large number of people in this party. All right, so I had criticized this notion of the school vouchers, which is nothing more than a socialist reform measure. It takes money from one group of people and gives it to another group of people. I criticized the reset regime, the Libertarian Party hierarchy, sending out fundraising letters to promote school vouchers, have an event to school vouchers, because we're the party of principle, and here we are advocating something that violates the core principle of libertarianism, the non-aggression principle. It takes money from one group of people and gives it to another group of people through taxation. And then, of course, it puts private schools under government control. Or there's this trend in the party to take over the public school systems, run people for public school boards, which is designed to be part of the system. Get in there and help run the system as libertarians. Well, which is a massive socialist program. I mean, it'd be difficult to find a better example of socialism than public government schooling. And I pointed this out in my talk there, my preliminary talk before the Alaska Libertarian Party. Public schooling is based on central planning. You've got compulsory attendance laws. You've got school taxes, force funding the program. You've got indoctrination, regimentation. I mean, it's classic socialism. So after I concluded my talk, a lady comes to the microphone and says, "Well, Jacob, I have to disagree with you on this. And I'm a very practical person, and the fact is that public schooling is well established in Alaska and is guaranteed by the state constitution. So we're not going to change that. And so I believe in running libertarians for school board and getting involved in the process and trying to make the system better." Okay? Like I say, I think it's a popular sentiment. And of course, the Libertarian Party hierarchy, the reset regime, is sending out fundraising letters to help them run candidates. And all of my opponents favor either school vouchers or taking over the public school boards or both. Okay, and I oppose this. Okay, I oppose it most ardently because I say we libertarians, if we're going to lead America to freedom, we need to be making the case for freedom. And the only case for freedom is separation of school and state, like our founding fathers separated church and state. Now that's the case we should be making. But let me address her point. And see, this is why I love debates. I mean, because it gives me the opportunity to kind of share with somebody a perspective that may cause that person to question his premises. This is what Ayn Rand would say, check your premises if you find that there's an inconsistency here. And so, like one of the most gratifying things for me was when a person came up after one debate and said, "Jacob, I've been a proponent of school vouchers immigration controls all my life. And after hearing you in this debate, I am now an open borders advocate and I'll never go back." It's very gratifying. All right, so let's do a thought experiment on what this lady is saying, okay? Which, again, I think is a popular sentiment. Let's assume that everybody agrees with that point, including me. That public schooling is here. It's a fortified part of American life. It's guaranteed in the state constitutions. And so let's all of us just get together and participate in trying to make the system work. Okay, just accept that it's here. It's never going to change. We can call for the end of the Department of Education on the federal level, but as far as public schooling, all of us, 100% of libertarians, go ahead and start running for school boards and trying to take over the school boards and do everything we can to make the system better. And our fellow citizens will have respect for us. They'll see that we're doing our best to try to make the system work, and so forth. Question: what then happens to freedom? Where is freedom? Freedom has disappeared. Absolutely disappeared. Doesn't exist anymore. And more specifically, the hope for freedom disappears because it's in nobody's mind anymore. Everybody's now part of the hive, and everybody's working to make the hive better. And every libertarian's trying to get elevated into higher positions in the hive. Jacob, we've got 12 libertarians now elected to school boards in the hive. We're making the hive better, Jacob, and people have respect for us for this. And that's great. Now, what can we do to make it 20? Well, we're going to run better campaigns next time. But we're gonna run more people for offices in the hive than you can ever imagine. And so next time, Jacob, we reached our goal of 20. We got 20 people elevated in the hive. Okay, but everybody's on board now, you You see, that they're working within the hive. There is no sense of freedom. Or working within the hive and being elevated has been redefined as freedom. You see, you don't need a Room 101 anymore. Okay? Because there's no more Winston Smiths. There's no more Winston Smiths in that society that are questioning anything. Everybody's now part of the hive. Now let's take this thought experiment one step further. Let's say somebody from way another part of the world comes over and says, comes over to the United States and looks around and sees all the libertarians working within the hive. Everybody's working within the hive to make it better. And he starts asking questions and says, what are you doing in the hive? That's not freedom. Freedom means breaking out of the hive. That person is a dangerous person. He's a troublemaker. You see, and he has to be dealt with. He has to be silenced. He's just trying to show he's more libertarian and more principled than everybody. We need to exclude him from discussions. We need to exclude him from debates. Can't let him go on C-SPAN because he has a potential of stirring people up to cause them to start questioning, like waking up and saying, oh my gosh, what have I done with my life? I've become part of the hive. I'm bettering the hive. That's not freedom, that's serfdom. It's hive serfdom. And so that person becomes a real problem. He needs to be silenced in one way or another because he's now waking people up and making them realize that serving the hive is not freedom. And that to achieve freedom, we need to break free of the hive. And we need to destroy the structure of the hive so that every individual can live his life the way he wants to and not in accordance with the better good of the collective or the hive. And that's why it's so important that this party lead America to freedom. As I have said in convention after convention, Democrats can't do that. Republicans can't lead America to freedom. The only entity that can lead America to freedom are libertarians because of our philosophy. But if we throw in the towel and we say it's too hard, it's too difficult, because you see, state constitutions can be amended to abolish these things. You can have separation of school and state at the state level with a constitutional amendment. The same way that states have separation of church and state at the state level, as well as at the federal level with the First Amendment. You can amend state constitutions. It's difficult, but whoever said freedom was easy. But the only people that can lead America to freedom is us. We, the Libertarian Party. And if we throw in the towel and we accept our serfdom and resign ourselves to just improving the serfdom, making the serfdom better, making Medicare and Medicaid work with health savings accounts and school vouchers, and making Social Security work with some kind of reform there, we haven't achieved freedom, and we're not leading America to freedom. Instead, we're sitting there advocating libertarian socialism and serfdom reform, neither of which can lead this country to freedom, and neither of which, as we've seen, can garner a large number of votes. Our principles, if I say in every debate, every campaign, and what I would have said there in Washington at the National Convention, had I been permitted to participate in that debate, our principles are our greatest asset. And this is what leads America to freedom, is our principles, as well as achieve a major breakout in votes. I'm Jacob Hornberger, Libertarian candidate for president. My campaign website is Jacob for Liberty.